Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you're joining from today. Thank you for jumping on today's education session. Today we'll be looking at how MacLean-Fogg, a leading manufacturing company, is approaching supply and demand analytics to gain visibility into their JD Edwards supply chain data using Power BI. Before we jump in, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. So we will keep some time at the end for a Q&A session. So please be sure to enter your questions in the Q&A panel down at the bottom of your Zoom window. And we'll also be making the recording available to you after the session if you'd like to reference it again or share it with your colleagues. So the agenda for today is to start out with some quick introductions, and then we'll give you a quick overview of the quick launch supply and demand solution and how that was architected. Then we'll look at some challenges of supply and demand analytics and talk a little bit about how MacLean-Fogg has modernized their supply and demand analytics over the past year. And we'll jump into a demonstration of one of the dashboards that they use, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. So my name is David Kettinger. I'm the big goofy guy over here on the left of this picture, and I lead the marketing team here at Preferred Strategies. And at Preferred, we help companies turn their ERP system and other corporate data sources into a trusted cloud-based enterprise data model in order to help companies achieve their business outcomes. And we built the Quick Launch platform for companies who realized that they needed to replace their legacy ERP reporting tools and move to a more modern analytics solution. So I'm excited to have Brad Westrick here today to tell you about one of MacLean-Fogg's success stories around the supply chain space. When Brad is not busy being a quick launch data rock star at MacLean, he's also an avid family man. And I just learned recently at our customer appreciation party in Denver that he's also a very accomplished darts player. And then furthermore, this morning I learned today that Brad prefers to shovel his snow rather than use a snowblower. So that tells you just kind of what guy he is. We also have Corey Neutral on today, who was the architect behind our supply and demand solution. And really, she's going to give you some insights into the back end and how that was built. And when Corey's not busy being a data rock star, she loves to go mountain biking and all things outdoors, as well as root for all of the Denver sports teams. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Corey.
Well, thank you. If we can move over to the next slide. So I am glad I'm here to be able to give you an overview of the supply and demand solution. The core of the solution is we're going to put on one page anticipated shortages for your inventory items based on the supply inventory sources and the demand inventory sources, right? In addition to the combination of the supply and demand inventory sources, we're going to let you choose a date range that defines how far out do you want to see if you're going to have a shortage. So we'll move over to the next slide. And so as I referenced just now, I said that the supply and demand does need to have inventory sources. And when we're talking about supply inventory sources, we're definitely going to use the primary quantity on hand. And that's going to come from the JDE 41021 table. Additionally, we give you the option to say that supply can also include what's defined for the item in their in-transit bucket or the in-inspection bucket in the 41021. You don't have to use those, but we want you to know you have that as an option. And then another thing for supply comes from the work order. And we like to explain how we give you options for the work order. So we certainly know that work orders are in different statuses. You know, there's a pre-go to the floor status and there's a post on the floor status, right? And so what we let you have the option to do is say that supply, when the status is not, when the work order status is not on the floor, supply is going to come from the work order header. So that could be like the quantity ordered or the quantity ordered minus what's been shipped. But once everything's out on the floor, we give you the option to say that the supply quantity really is what's out in the route. So the WIP, right? So you could actually say that for work order statuses in progress, we just want to know what's at your quantity and operation, because that's maybe a more realistic view of what you're going to have in your supply shortly. And of course, then we include what's coming from the purchase order. But demand certainly is going to include the sales order detail, information from the 4211. We can include forecasts from the 3460, and additionally the parts list, the 3111. But we also give you the option to include safety stock as demand. And the scenario we always like to say for safety stock is, let's just look at what's on hand and what's in safety stock to see where we are just with those two values. So Brad's going to be able to show you how this looks in his outline, but we want you to know we considered as much as we, as much as needed out of JD Edwards to get supply and get demand. So we'll go over to the next page. And then what I always like to explain is that the supply and demand configuration, it requires three things that are going to come out of the supply sources and out of the demand sources. One is we want to know which quantity you want to use that represents supply. So we talked about how the primary quantity on hand would be part of the definition for supply, or how the work order header could use quantity ordered, or the work order parts list, or excuse me, the route could include quantity at operation. So we give you that flexibility to define the quantity, right? It could be any quantity you get to choose. And then we say, when do you want to define when the supply is needed and when the demand is needed and when the supply will be available based on a date. So, if I talk about the sales example for demand, you have the choice to say it could be the pick date or it could be the requested date from the client. You get to define a date where it's going to say supply is available or demand is needed. And then certainly we want you to share with us, how do you want to include what's considered supply and how do you want to include what's considered demand? So I am using the word inclusion rules because that's part of JD Edwards terminology, but we want you to know you can go beyond the JD Edwards definition for inclusion rules, which is just order type, line type, and next status. You could make that even broader. You could say something like where, a certain date is not past this future. You have the flexibility for all these three core configuration components to do a supply and demand solution. We'll go to the next page.
Brad, you want to steal the screen?
Yep, I'm gonna do that right now.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you guys. And yeah, so I want to start off by kind of telling you a little bit about MacLean-Fogg and who we are. And then I want to talk a little bit about why we were pursuing the solution we put together and how we went about it, what we were trying to solve, and then into a little demonstration on what it is and how we're using it from a couple different perspectives. So to start off, MacLean-Fogg is a manufacturing company. We were founded in 1925 and producing lock nuts to the railroad industry. And over the last 99 years, we've grown to more than 2,000 employees and over 5 divisions. We're headquartered in Mundelein, Illinois, and operate out of 19 manufacturing facilities in North America and Europe, and we have a support presence around the globe. So what we product offerings, we have over those 5 divisions. We support customers in the automotive, heavy truck, industrial, and material handling industries. So jumping right in, the problem that we faced was with one of our sites where they were struggling to manage their supply of finished goods to support customer order requirements mostly due to the complexity of their production process and some of the limitations within JDE to help them prioritize their activities. So some of the things we heard from that division, they were spending hours every day pulling multiple reports, from Reports Now, from table exports from JDE, pouring them into Excel spreadsheet or multiple Excel spreadsheets, pivot tables, and everything else to try and pull that data together to determine where they're short for customer orders and where they need to expedite product that was in production. There was other folks that we talked to that were doing essentially the same thing, but they wanted to look further out. They wanted to incorporate forecast. So a similar look, but just different parameters. So again, they were putting a lot of report development time and effort in, and ultimately this is what we were hearing. They by the time they had that all pulled together, and that was a daily practice, they lost hours of production time that they could have used to reprioritize and react. So what makes this a challenge for us? We have some facilities that have simple routings, single step routings. This facility is very different, right? We have typically large production work orders with long lead times. They're typically high volume orders with multiple routing operations. Most of those have outside operations, and most of them have multiple outside operations within that same work order. So definitely some challenges there. I put down WIP inventory partials throughout routing operations. What I mean by that is we don't wait for the entire quantity to complete at each operation before we begin a partial on the next operation. And so what that results in is WIP inventory at different quantities in multiple operations and work centers for each work order. So, and then I put work order header reliability, and the work order header reflects a single open balance quantity and completion date. And it doesn't give us a clean or realistic look at how many parts will be available and when. And that directly affects our MRP message accuracy. So I say that MRP is demand type indifferent, right? It doesn't care if it's demand from customer orders or safety stock or forecast or a parent work order parts list. MRP is using all those things to do its calculations to tell you when we need to place orders, when we need to expedite, and all of that. And then MRP is assuming our inventory is accurate and our open work orders and purchase order balances and due dates are accurate. And it's using all of that, again, in its calculation to tell us what to do and how to react and how to expedite or where we need to put our efforts. That's where some of the complexities I talked about, where we have, inventory at multiple routing steps. MRP doesn't calculate off of those routing steps. It's looking at that header, balance, and due date. And then the last item here that I put in is the work center visibility. And we typically have multiple work orders in a work center at a time. So we need a way to provide visibility to a material manager or a department manager on really the critical requirements for them to prioritize their work center schedule. So the goal of the solution we're trying to put together is really on-time delivery to our customers. And so we needed to create a solution that would, number one, identify critical parts. And our formula for that was, where do we have on-hand quantity that's less than our customer order quantity? As simple as that, really a negative availability list. So we call that our critical parts list. And we want to be able to look at that within a date range. So again, I had different groups that were looking at it maybe for today or tomorrow. Another group that was looking at it a week out or 2 weeks out, and trying to get ahead of some of those issues. To get to that formula, we wanted to be able to toggle off and exclude safety stock and forecast demand, and really only get to the demand side of it as customer orders, customer firm orders only. And then on the supply side, I'm saying that we wanted to be able to suppress the supply to prioritize it. And again, back on those work orders, if I had a work order due tomorrow for 1 million pieces, But within that work order, I had inventory at different routing steps. I'm probably not going to have all of it complete by tomorrow. So I have to have some visibility to where I have that inventory in those routing steps. And if the system thinks that I have everything arriving tomorrow and that's not true, I want to be able to turn that off again, to get back to that equation up above where I'm saying I only want to see my on hand as my supply and my customer orders as my demand, and that's really my critical parts list. The next thing we needed this solution to do was allow us to close that gap and help us to do that prioritization. So we needed to know what parts are in the process and where are they at what operation, and then how many are at each operation. And if we can prioritize that, then we need to be able to go to each of those work centers, find out who's responsible, and help them prioritize and have visibility to really where do we have the critical parts, what are the critical parts, which are the priorities. Outside of FIFO, they need to have a way of saying these are the three, that we really need to prioritize over the rest. So that's what we were looking for in a solution. So our idea was to use Power BI and supply and demand within Power BI. And so again, what our ultimate goal is achieving the highest level of on-time delivery to our customers. We also need to identify anticipated problems on that critical parts list, and we want to be able to prioritize our efforts to support our customer requirements. We needed to figure out how are we going to provide quick and thorough visibility from our demand all the way through our supply chain, and then how can we use this tool to help us improve our own system data integrity, and having our system really reflect as close as possible to what is real. So why Power BI? What I want to walk through on this slide is just a few of the advantages we were able to take or get out of Power BI and working with Preferred Strategies and the quick launch data model in their supply and demand perspectives. So again, we talked about this, being able to select a date range. With Power BI, we can easily use a slicer for date range. We can use slicers for quick filtering against a stock type or a department or planning family or whatever else we want to use as a slicer to limit the grouping of part numbers that we want to analyze. A big one here is that ability to toggle on and off our elements of supply and demand. The biggest one being our safety stock. We don't want to discard our safety stock. We do want to consider it, but I don't want to consider that first, right? My background is in purchasing. And so one of the things that I would always, if I came in and was looking at my messages and I had 25 or 50 expedite messages, if some of those are because I'm dipping into my safety stock, I want to address those, but I don't want to address those first. I really want to be taking a look at where am I short for production or short for a customer order. Those are the ones that I need to prioritize. So being able to toggle off that safety stock allows us to just, focus in on our, true demand, our true customer demand. Same thing with forecast, being able to toggle on and off forecast. On the supply side, I mentioned work orders. So these would be work orders that we've created, we haven't started yet, and then work in progress. That's a work order that we have started and we have, partially complete, or we have inventory at some of those operations along the way. And then open purchase orders, going back to purchasing, the demand for those components is going to be the work order parts list. So those elements of supply and demand were important to us to be able to toggle on and off. Power BI also gives us the ability to put all of that together into one report and give us visibility to that inventory detail and to the availability issues, and being able to drill down into the sales order, purchase order, and work order details, and the work center. What do we all have in the work center? And then lastly, Power BI gives us those nice dynamic, interactive, visual features. So we're able to focus on a specific item number and dynamically change some of the visuals on our report. We're able to use some drill throughs to get to some of that sales order, purchase order detail. And then we're able to use tooltip pages to, again, bring that data or the view of what we want our users to see right to the front page, put it as close as we can, you know, to their fingertips to be able to, again, we're not trying to spend a lot of time drilling page to page to page through different screens in JDE or reports that we're using, or Excel tools that we've created. We want to be able to put as much as we can as close to one place as we can, and Power BI gives us that ability. So jumping right into the demonstration, this is our supply and demand anticipated problems report. And I'm going to talk about it from three perspectives. The first is our production planning, and that's really where we started with this, is really a tool for our production folks and our planners there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the work center detail and getting visibility into what do we have at any given work center. And then lastly, looking at it from a purchasing perspective and kind of switching some of the filters and the slicers over to purchase parts, and seeing if we can utilize the same tool to give them visibility similar to what we're doing with production planning. So I'll start, excuse me, I'll start here. And what I'll show you here is some of the elements that we talked about. So to start, I have the date slicer. So we have a date slicer here where I'm going to say, show me where I have an anticipated problem over the next 4 days. And you can see how when I select that, this was on a Friday, so I'm seeing Friday through a Monday here. And I also have some slicers on stocking types and master planning family. Again, just to kind of, maybe I need to narrow down to a specific master planning family, and maybe someone else is looking at a different planning family, but that's a nice feature to be able to use. This is the inventory filter piece of it. This is a big advantage that we can get. This is where we're going to be able to toggle on and off some of those elements of supply and demand. And really the meat of this report and this page is the projected inventory. And we have a filter in the background that says only show us parts where this is negative, where that projected inventory is negative over that date range that we have selected. One of the features that our end users asked for was the ability to see where we had an earliest demand date from a customer. So if I had a negative, what's the earliest customer order due date that we have out there, so we can prioritize even within this list to try to address the oldest ones as early as, or as quickly as possible. And then the last piece of this is the source quantity details visual. And this is where we're going to be able to use some of the features where we click on a single item number, and it allows this visual to only show us those source quantity details are on hand, our safety stock, our work in progress, the demand side of it. We can see all those details right from this visual here. So we'll see that in some of the demonstration. But one of the things I mentioned as a big important piece to us was to be able to toggle off that safety stock. So you'll see here, if I click on that safety stock and unselect it as my inventory filter, I've now shortened my list to these 5 items where I have a negative availability. Again, this is assuming that any work orders that I have in progress are going to complete when they say they're going to complete. But it's a quick short list of where are my shortages outside of safety stock. Now, as I mentioned, there's a formula for the critical parts list that we wanted to take into account, which is our on hand compared to our firm sales orders. So if I toggle off everything else, now I'm down to that critical parts list. And these are the items where I have an anticipated problem on a critical part because we have less on hand than we have demand in firm sales orders. So really, this is a good place for us to start. And again, this is where that earliest demand date's coming into hand, because it's ordering these items by the oldest customer order due date out there. So some of this data is from our test environment, and so forgive some of the old data that's out here, but I think it's still useful to show you how this is going to work. So I'm going to click on this first part number on the top of the list here, and you'll see how that bottom visual then is going to dynamically change, and now it's showing you all the source quantity details for that. So I can see I have 120,000 pieces on hand. I have sales orders for almost 1 million pieces, and a work order for 222,000 that's showing due on 9/6, which is the date that I initially put this together. So what I want to show here is we put in a tooltip page. So if I hover over this quantity, you'll see that I get this tooltip that shows me the open work orders that I have, and I have it ordered by the operation sequence descending. So now I have a list of work orders with the quantity at each of those operations, and the top of the list is the closest to being complete. So I can quickly, by just hovering over this part number, see where I have inventory in production, which is very useful to our users. If I wanted to drill down in and look at that detail, so I said I have a sales order for 1 million pieces, I can drill into this, do a drill through to the sales order details, and we'll see that that earliest demand date had a 7/15. So what you'll see here is on the top visual here, we've got 7/15 and then another one for 8/5, and those are rolling forward to that 9/6 date. So I'm not looking way in the past when we're trying to calculate our projected inventory. We're rolling all that up to today, but I do have visibility to it by drilling in here, and the visual on the bottom is giving me some of those sales order details. So I can click on the back button and go back here. If I want to do a similar thing and I want to look at the details on the supply side for a production order, I want to take a look at what do I have for work order details in production. So that's my work in production. So I'm going to click on that, drill through, and similarly, this is taking us to our supply. So I've got this top visual, which is showing me those open work orders. I opened up an old one here, so you can see there's an old work order way back due on April 30th for 43,000 pieces. So if I'm working through this report, going back to some of the data integrity stuff, is that real? My guess is it's not. Well, then we want to go through the effort of getting this cleaned up, but we want to understand what's going on with that order. So if I click on that item, that middle visual is now showing me the work order header details for just that work order. So I can see that it's still at status 45. It was created way back in December of last year. So I got to figure out what's going on with that. I do see on the right side, I've got a quantity ordered and a quantity shipped, but there's still a balance out there. So I can look into the work order routing from here. This is looks similar to that tooltip page that we saw when we hovered over it, but it gives me that operation sequence in a descending order. And I can see where I have inventory. I've got a negative quantity out there at a op 90. Looking down the list, I've got an outside operation. So I've got an order here, and there's that operation sequence. Here's my operation quantity. This is that outside op order. So it looks to me like there's 13,000 pieces left. Now, this is what's showing in the work order routing. I want to be able to see what's on that outside op purchase order. So we have a drill through here, and this was another request from our site. They wanted to be able to drill right down to the detail of this. And as you see here, again, I kind of opened up an old one here to put this together, but it shows that on that top visual, we don't have anything open. So that top visual is an open purchase order detail. And you can see on the bottom visual too, this just gives us all of the details, and there is no open quantity on that PO. When we close that PO, it doesn't automatically clean up the quantity on the routing. So this is a step where when we see this is going to help us get our system cleaned up. So I'm going to kind of jump ahead here, fast forward to 9/17. If I drill back into that same WIP view, you can see here, I've got this cleaned up. So I closed that order up, and I went back in and took a look at this. But again, just to kind of give you some of this visibility, I'll pick another work order here. If I click on this, again, my work order header details now shows me only that work order, and that bottom visual is only showing me the operations and where I have quantity within the operations of that work order. So again, here I have another outside operation purchase order, so I can drill in, I can take a look at that PO detail, and now we have visibility. I've got 2 different POs out there, could be different lot numbers or heat numbers, and it gives us some of that PO detail kind of right at our within the report, being able to kind of drill right into that detail. So I'm going to back up to the beginning of this screen, and I'll kind of show you what we'll do. Our users will, as they're going through this, again, I was showing you how we can hover over that item. I can take a look at this and determine where do we need to prioritize at what level, looking at that operation sequence, where do we have that inventory that we need to take a look at. This next item, it looks like I'm short 26,000 pieces. You can see below that there's, on that source quantity visual on the bottom, the sales order is for that 26,000. There's work in progress of 216,000, but by hovering over this, I can see where is that quantity, and I see that I've got 28,000 that are at op sequence 75. And so I'm going to maybe reach out to our work center manager for 2 Viz 9, whatever that work center is, right, and make sure that they're prioritizing that 28,000 to get completed and ready for shipment to our customer. So same thing, I can kind of work my way down this list. This 13,000, it looks like I've got some in visual and final inspection. We want to make sure we get those through. And jumping down the line here, 97,000 pieces short on this one. Looks like I have some in final inspection, but not enough. So I also have an outside op purchase order. Probably need to reach out to Curtis and find out where that inventory is at and when I can get that PO back so we can get it through inspection and again, ready for shipment to our customer. So the next perspective I want to look at is our work center management. And this is another page on our report where we have work center detail. This page gives us the ability to select a department. So in this case, I'll select our quality control department, and maybe I want to take a look at a specific business unit. I'll pick that final inspection. We have a lot of work orders going through, and so we've got a lot of stuff in final inspection at the same time. And again, how do we prioritize all of those things in final inspection? One of the ways we're prioritizing is exactly what we've been looking at from the production side of it, and that is where is our most critical need, and then communicating that through to our work center managers. But another way that we wanted to do it was through this tool is to give some visibility within this work order. So within this work center detail page. So I'm going to take this example here. This is a work order. It looks like there's 48,000 in final for this work order. I'm just pointing out here, I have a little informational piece that's telling the users how they can use this tool by doing the steps I'm about to walk through, which I'm going to click on this item number, and you'll see again how that projected inventory availability, I've pulled that through to this screen and put it on the bottom of the screen. So when we click on an item, now we have just that projected availability on this item. And we can see that we have 162,000, so we're okay for 9/17. We've got 27,000 available on 9/18. It looks like on 9/20 is where we're going to run short. So this has given us just as I'm clicking on this, I'm getting some visibility to the urgency of this item. And then similarly, I can hover over this item and I can see if I'm final inspection, or maybe I'm an earlier operation and I want some visibility to my coverage, if I'm short, kind of stepping back here, right, I'm short 73,000 for 9/20. If I hover over that, I can see that there's another operation after me, which is in this case a sort operation, and they have 118,000. So I'm probably good for 9/20, but then I'm not going to be good for 9/23. So again, I just on this item, I have visibility to the other items that are in other operations, and it helps you just put visibility in to our users in one place where they can kind of see that information all from here. And the last perspective I wanted to talk about was the purchasing side of it. So I put a bookmark in here where we click on this purchasing view, and what that's doing is it's just changing some of the parameters and the slicers that we've got. So I have this now looking out a week, so I'm looking 7 days out. And you can see that reflected in those visuals. I have a stocking type changed to purchase raw materials, And in this case, I'm actually going to change the master planning family to components. And again, I have that short list. You can see on my inventory filter, I'm looking at my on hand and my work order parts list. And again, that's going to be my demand for components. But maybe I have good, if I have good integrity on my purchase orders and I trust when I'm going to receive those, I could toggle on my purchase order inventory as my supply. And then this would be cleaned up even further. But again, we wanted to kind of put the same functionality around purchase parts. So if I click on this item, you'll see that bottom visual is now showing me that I have a work order that's calling for 57,000 pieces, but I don't have any open purchase orders. I don't have anything on hand for this item, but I don't have any open POs that are showing due in the next 7 days. So that's something, as a buyer, I need to address that. So one of the things we can do similarly here is I can drill into, if I want to look at the demand side again, I can click on my parts list. That's the demand for a component. So I can see the work orders that are driving that 57,000 piece demand for 8/26. I see another 150 out there for January. And then I can see on the visual on the bottom, some of those, the details of those work orders. Stepping back, similarly, we wanted to be able to drill into the supply side of this. So I don't have any POs due in the next 7 days, but if I drill into the PO detail, I can see that I do have a purchase order out there for mid-October, and I can see those purchase order details here as well. Again, nice to know, but I'd like to put that a little closer. I don't necessarily want to drill into that every time, so we did the same tool type hover where if I wanted to see that PO that's out there, I can just hover over that item here, and I can see the 150,000 that we've got due on 10/16. I need to give Prestige Stamping a call and expedite those that purchase order. So, in summary, what we're trying to do is we're trying to obviously close the gap on our shortages to customer demand. So we wanted to be able to identify those critical parts and then prioritize our production. So again, this solution gave us those abilities, gave us the ability to use a date range to toggle on and off the supply and demand elements. And it gave us the visibility that we needed to where is our inventory in our process. So with that, I always ask, I'm always trying to learn and trying to find new ways to make this better. And so that's one thing we take back to our team is, this is always kind of it's always in progress, right? There's always things we can do to do it better and make it better. And so I always kind of ask if there's any ideas you guys have. And so I'm open to your questions and any comments or recommendations.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. Somebody's told me today, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And certainly you've proved that you are armed with data. And that was a great presentation. And it's exciting to see how MacLean-Fogg is leveraging Power BI to accomplish that. We did have quite a few questions come in. I'm not quite sure the order to ask them in, but I'll do my best here. So one question was, are you actively reading the JDE files or are you warehousing the detailed data? I'm not sure which one of you guys want to jump in and answer that one.
I can.
Cool.
Yeah, so this example is on a replicated data setup. It's not reading against your JD Edwards data, so that your JD Edwards database server, so that we're not causing all kinds of congestion or processing that we don't need. The data for most of the clients that we work with is replicated from E1 into maybe a SQL MI, and we're actually going forward with a lot of clients where everything's landing in Delta Lakes, right? And then we use Databricks to pull the information over into the model. So those are the typical options that we see from our clients.
Okay, awesome. I had another question here, which was around does your supply and demand solution work with lean manufacturing also? And I think Trish put in a follow-up question as well, or a follow-up statement as well, Corey.
Yeah. So what Trish provided for this question is that lean manufacturing doesn't use work order, parts lists, or routings until the completion is actually done. It reads the BOM and the routing and backflush parts, right? Since those are tables and data in the JDE system, we would want to coordinate with you to figure out how we can bring that in, because it's, make sure we get the right effective dates kind of concept, that would be all part of the definition of what the quantity is, or, the date and all that kind of stuff, because it's really tricky, because we want to make sure we're doing something on the BOM that's specific for the finished good only, right? Or the subcomponent only, or the raw material. So we would want to have a better detailed conversation around that. It's there, so the potential is there to be included as a supply source, but we got to make sure we understand what you're looking for from the master setups with the BOM or with the route, right?
Awesome. Thanks for taking a stab at that, Corey. Certainly over my head, along with the next one. But so can your supply and demand supply sources include parts that the planning code has been set to 0 because it was a VMI planned part? And there was also a sort of a follow-up to that question that she provided too.
Yeah, so vendor managed inventory do not create files in the time series, the 3413 file. The quantity on hand still shows in the 41021 inventory location. I'm assuming it's not, I'm assuming it's some bucket in the 4102, or excuse me, column in the 41021. And if that's true, if it's, some sort of quantity we can get out of the 41021, yes, we'd be able to add that. Just like out of the box, we give the option to include whatever's in the in-transit column or the in-inspection column. I know we're only communicating through typing and me talking, but let me know if that's close to the answers that you were hoping to hear.
Yeah, that's great. We can certainly follow up with you,
Yeah.
Trish.
Thank you for the questions.
Yeah. So this one might be a little bit more towards Brad, but somebody mentioned this seems like more of a reactive tool than a proactive tool. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, and it is. It is a reactive tool. And I think it would be great to be able to make this more of a proactive tool. We're not there yet. Right now, as I was kind of mentioning, we were spending a ton of time trying to put together Excel spreadsheets, which were also reactive tools, but we were spending hours every day doing that. And I think one of the biggest benefits we are getting out of this is we're not having to spend that time preparing the data. We're able to act on it. And I'm hopeful that, with that, we're able to then, our users are able to take that time that's saved to take a look at, what some of the root cause, right? Why do we have these issues or these shortages, and what can we do? Maybe it's a safety stock analysis, or is there some bottlenecks that we need to address? But definitely, it's a good question. And I think the supply and demand perspective has the potential to do that, to be able to provide us some of that proactive tool. But this one is reactive, but important to us. Good question.
Thanks, Brad. Next question here was really around what does the adoption look like for the solution at MacLean-Fogg, and what do you have planned to drive this further?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So on the adoption, again, this was really focused at a single plant. So we have right now a pretty select number of users that are using it. So it's not widely adopted yet, but again, each of our sites are a little different, and so As I mentioned, some of them use multi-step routings. So this type of report is going to, I think, work very well for them as well. So we're in the process of kind of tweaking it a little bit to fit their business model, which is slightly different. But we also have some sites that use, as I mentioned, single step routings. And so some of the detail with the multi-step routings isn't really applicable for them. So we're also in the process of doing the same thing and recreating a version of this report using supply and demand for those plants as well. On the adoption end of things, another thing we're working on right now is embedding this in the E1 page. So they are able to, right from JDE, click on it, open up this report right from within JDE. So that's another piece where you don't have to go and open a new tool somewhere else. It's kind of all in the same place that you're used to working every day.
Okay, well, that wraps up all the questions, I think. Yep. So Brad, really appreciate you coming on here and sharing the MacLean-Fogg story. And thanks again, everybody, for taking time out of your day to join. We'll follow up with the recording and the slide deck. And if you have any follow-up questions, we're here to answer them. So hope everybody else has a great rest of your week, and talk to you soon.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
everyone. Thank you, Brad.